My name is Meg Juarez, and this is my story. My parents, Luis and Marta Juarez, were victims that day. My father was the oldest of the murdered victims, 90 years old, and my mom survived after being shot in the arm, almost losing her arm, and now lives with a metal rod in her arm. I'm the youngest of seven children, and my parents were married 70 years. That fateful morning of August 3rd was a pretty typical Saturday morning for me. I was having coffee and getting ready to make some breakfast when the call came from my sister. In Portland, Oregon, where I live, we're an hour behind. To hear the words, my mom and dad had been shot, felt so unreal. And even more confusing was my sister saying that she and her husband were on their way to Walmart, and I'm wondering how she knew they'd been shot. It turns out my mother was able to dial my sister's number from her small flip phone. She was hiding under a register. This 88-year-old who had just witnessed her husband of 70 years murdered in front of her eyes. She would later tell us that she begged a man who was also hiding help her dial as her hands and phone were bloodied. She'd been shot in the shoulder. She told my sister that something terrible had just happened to them. When I got the call, I was alone, so I was freaking out and called some friends. And this is where resilience is fostered in community. My friends, who many were on their way to enjoy a beautiful Saturday, some were heading out on road trips, others to the coast, and canceled their plans and were at my house within hours. They brought food and were just being present with me during this intense situation. Not being able to be there in El Paso and frantically looking for any news, calling other relatives there in El Paso to see what they'd heard. This horrific event impacted the entire El Paso community, and those who were directly impacted, like my family, were all impacted in so many different ways, but the end result was the same. We lost loved ones, and many were injured. The continued impact on my family has been tremendous, and especially since my parents were independent and took such good care of each other. And most of us children don't live in El Paso. So now that my mother is alone, it has been very difficult for everyone, and especially for her, from trying to recover from her injuries physically and emotionally, then experiencing social isolation in the wake of COVID, then contracting COVID herself in 2021. Needless to say, I made many trips to El Paso these past couple of years, as my siblings and I try to pitch in and help care for mom and her affairs as much as we can. Incidents such as this have long-lasting effects, especially for those directly impacted. So the resilience in all of this is how communities come together. Not only did the El Paso community show incredible resilience and cohesion, but so did others like mine in Portland. My community in Portland held fundraisers and were so supportive because now they too knew someone impacted by a mass shooting, the degrees of separation getting smaller. Even if they didn't know anyone in El Paso, they cared and wanted to help in some way. So as we foster resilience, let's also not forget that this can happen again. As many have said in El Paso, this doesn't happen in our community. This person came from somewhere else. Yes, but let us not forget that El Paso is not an island. We must continue to bring awareness. It is so important that we Latinos get more involved in supporting one another through civic engagement, systems change, and policies and social justice. So let's be resilient, but let's not forget and simply stand by and say this doesn't happen in our community, because it is happening in communities across our country. And as James Baldwin said so eloquently, a civilization is not destroyed by wicked people. It is not necessary that people be wicked, but only that they be spineless. So let's not be spineless, mi gente. Finally, my family and I would like to thank and identify the angels who helped my mom that day, the person who helped my mom use her flip phone, and the person who put her in a shopping cart and took her out of the store. Otherwise, she would have bled to death. Muchísimas gracias. And someday, we'd love to thank those angels personally. And thank you, El Paso Family Resilience Center, for providing this space. Juntos sanamos y también luchamos contra el odio y el racismo.